So let's talk about this triangle at the top of the Gleason's map. Everybody says it's a Masonic triangle. Well, it is an isosceles triangle. I'm not so sure it's Masonic. By looking at it, if you notice all the 3 points, the base of the triangle is at a very specific position of the 45-degree south latitude. Now, what's interesting is that if you flip it upside down, it points exactly to the North Pole. Now, this is very important because by doing that, it actually marks the position of the base as being measurable. So in other words, the distance from the base to the top of the sun emblem that's on the map is equal to the distance between the base of the triangle and the North Pole. And by doing that, we can calculate the distance because longitudinal lines are equidistant on a circle map and as azimuthal equidistant map. And we can calculate the distance because every degree is 60 nautical miles. So let's look at what they've told us so far. The moon is 238,000 miles away from the Earth. There's 29.5 average moon days. That's a synodic. I'm assuming that's on a yearly basis. Couldn't really find that on Wikipedia. The sun is 93 million miles away. And the distance to the sun versus the moon is 390 times. But they always say it's 400 times further away than the moon is to the Earth. So now we look at what we know so far, what we have discovered. We know from the North Pole to the equator is 90 degrees. We know from the equator to 45 degree south is another 45 degrees. So if we add them up, we have a total of 135 degrees. 135 degrees times 60 nautical miles, because 1 degree is equal to 60 nautical miles, comes out to 8,100 nautical miles. So according to this, the sun at the equator is 8,100 nautical miles, or 9,321 statute miles, up in the sky. So now let's look at a little coincidence. The 8,100 miles, if you multiply that by the average moon length, comes out to 238,000 miles. If you take the 238,950 and multiply that by the 390 times distance, you also come out with 93 million miles. Interesting.
Coincidence? I think not.
Getting back to the triangle, here's one extra little tidbit. If you rotate the triangle and position the right corner to the North Pole as it states on the corner north, and the left corner is always pointing south, the sun now will point to the black line all the way around the map. And basically what it does is it tells us that the sun is coming from the east and that it's marking the hours of the Earth as the sun rotates. Now, let me ask you something. What does this look like to you?
Hey, Vsauce! Michael here. In 2003, researchers did the measurements and found that Kansas is in fact literally flatter than a pancake. Of course, the Earth is not flat, the Earth is round. Otherwise, travelers would be falling off the edge all the time. Right? Wrong. If the Earth was not a ball shape, but was instead a flat disk, like this plate, well, with the right density and thickness, living in the middle could feel pretty normal. But as you moved toward the edge, gravity on a disk Earth would slightly skew, pushing at a greater and greater angle back toward the center. My friend Nick from Yeti Dynamics put together this great simulation. The person and buildings obviously aren't to scale, but check out how such increasingly diagonal gravity would work. Although this is a flat disk, it would feel to a runner headed toward the edge like they were fighting to climb up a steeper and steeper hill. The building foundations behind the runner reflect how you would have to build structures closer and closer to the edge so that people living in them always felt like down was at right angles to the floor, the way we feel it on our big round Earth. Now, as you approach the edge, things would get scary. Remember, this is a flat Earth, but it would feel like a sheer drop-off. What's really cool is that contrary to the don't fall off the edge fear, on a flat world, because of gravity, the scary risk would actually be falling away from the edge and rolling all the way back to the center. Once you stepped over the edge, instead of falling off into space, you'd be able to relax. It would be a nice, level place. This model, of course, neglects the fact that such a planet shape would be impossible. Anything as massive as the Earth, shaped like a flat disk, would, under its own gravity, naturally collapse back into a ball. This is why in outer space, everything more than a few hundred miles in diameter is round. Or so we've been told. What if gravity isn't real? What if the Earth is in fact flat and science has been wrong all along? It's a misconception that Christopher Columbus discovered that the Earth is round. Virtually every scholar and major religion in the West accepted Earth's rotundity since at least the time of the ancient Greeks, who, for instance, had noticed that boats disappear bottom first when sailing away, and as you walk north and south, stars pop into and out of view. The misconception that only a few hundred years ago lots and lots of people believed the Earth was flat likely began in the modern era as a sort of insult, your people recently thought the Earth was flat, so why should we believe you now? The smear was repeated and published so often it became accepted as historical fact. Flat earther became synonymous with anti-science. It might seem flat over short distances, but over longer ones, the Earth is pretty darn curvy. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge, connecting Staten Island and Brooklyn, had to be designed with Earth's roundness in mind. Its two towers, separated by 1,300 meters and perfectly vertical, are nonetheless 41 millimeters further apart at the top than at the bottom because of Earth's curvature. In the 3rd century BC, Eratosthenes measured the differences between shadows cast by poles in Syene and Alexandria to calculate, more than 2,000 years before rockets and space travel, the circumference of the entire globular Earth, with, for the time, impressive accuracy. Word got around that the Earth was a round shape after that. But in 1906, Wilbur Glenn Villava became head of a slightly bizarre religious sect that pretty much ran the city of Zion, Illinois. Villava believed that the Earth was actually flat, and he enforced flat Earth teachings in schools in Zion. He also enforced that belief on really anyone who entered the city. Villava believed not only that the Earth was flat, but that the sun was only a few thousand miles away from Earth, not 93 million. He also believed that the sun was only 32 miles across, not 860,000. He sounds crazy. Or does he? You see, the same phenomenon Eratosthenes measured could be explained by a flat Earth if the sun were only a few thousand miles away and 32 miles across. The math would work out the same. Today, with the power of the internet, modern-day flat earthers have picked up where Villava left off. They have quite good explanations for any evidence you throw at them that the Earth is round. Circumnavigation is really just a flat circle path. The round shadow Earth casts on the moon during a lunar eclipse could also be made by a flat disk. Time zones are caused by a spotlight sun. And remember how gravity would be totally different on a disc-shaped planet? Well, they argue that gravity as we know it simply doesn't exist. The flat disk of Earth is merely accelerating up at 9.8 meters per second. As for all of the photos and video evidence we now have that the Earth is round thanks to space exploration, well, all of that material is completely fabricated. A hoax perpetrated by Big Globe. Space agencies, airlines, globe manufacturers, they are reaping the rewards of our ignorant belief that the Earth is actually round. They know, of course, that it's flat, and they're hiding that truth from us. Is it merely a coincidence that the logo used by the Flat Earth Society is a projection of Earth centered on the North Pole and also happens to be the projection used by the United Nations? Are these people for real? Probably not most of them, but this is the crux of Poe's law. An adage that states that at their extremes, parody of extremism and sincere extremism are difficult to distinguish. Although clever, flat Earth theories are predominantly ad hoc explanations, excuses made up on the spot that only address one issue and don't fit all the evidence. Science, of course, rejects a theory if a better one fits more of our observations, but why the egotistical obsession with our observations? A cosmic ray particle could use the very same scientific method we use and conclude that the Earth was in fact flat. You see, at speeds near the speed of light, time slows down and lengths contract. One way we know this is that unstable muons created in the upper atmosphere by the collision of cosmic rays with the atmosphere should mostly decay before reaching Earth's surface. But yet, we detect a lot of them down here, because their crazy fast speed literally means that from our perspective, their physics runs according to a slower clock. And to them, the distance they have to cover to the surface during their short lives is, from their perspective, much, much shorter than it appears to us. If you were a cosmic ray proton traveling at 99.99999999991% the speed of light, Earth would appear to be only 17 meters thick in the direction you traveled. So Earth is flat to them, but round to us. It is ball-shaped to some observers and flat to others. There doesn't appear to be a single, most correctest in all circumstances answer.
These atheist apologists for the so-called scientific method, they like to belittle people. Talking about this fella here in 1906, you curveballers probably a big fan of Mr. Vsauce, but anyhow, he doesn't mention this part too much. You do get the same phenomena if it's flat, and he's not pointing this fact out from the center of the sun over is 3,000 miles. That's why it's 3,000 miles away in relation to it being 92.9 million miles away, causing a 45 degree at this latitude and longitude on this day and time, when the sun is where they say it is. So he doesn't even mention this. See, you can go and check out the Sperry Gyroscope Company and the inventor's son wing walking in Washington, D.C., flying over the Delaware River, I believe, demonstrating the accuracy of the Sperry Gyroscope. No ring laser gyro there to adjust for the curvature of the Earth. Got to question this stuff, curveball. Wake up. There's deceivers everywhere. Sorry, my curveball friend. I just want to make sure that you're not deceived as this brother here. I believe facts observed using the scientific method, not gravity theories passed off as facts. You can repeat the test on camera that proves Big G, my physics-loving friend. If you can't, perhaps you can show me a demonstration of how the non-vacuum of our outer space can exist next to our atmosphere without a container or a dome. I won't hold my breath. There is as much truth in the theory of gravity as there is life in the deer pictured on my channel. Here is a proof video you can make using the scientific method instead of mocking videos. During the 2024 eclipse, film it from both west and east of the center of the path of totality and explain, using our current cosmological understanding, of how, if you are less than 100 miles apart, why the shadow on the face of the sun will flip 180 degrees from when you compare videos. How can any sane person, I guess you're sane, still believe in the ball Earth after looking into this fact when you consider the news never talks about it? They can't explain it with our current cosmos, so it is ignored. I'm sure you'll ignore this statement, just like they ignore these facts. The media always talks about other little so-called solar eclipse factoids like Bailey's beads to reinforce the idea of the moon being the cause of the shadow. Well, friend, if you aren't really looking for the truth, you will never ask the tough questions. Watch the first 10 minutes of the number 33 movie in this month's playlist, and you will see the truth.
First off, I'm going to zoom out on this just about as far as I possibly can. If you notice, let's go back in just a little bit further. Alright, if you notice right here, something that is marked off on this map, it actually begins right here on the edge. And please forgive me, hopefully this will be the last video I film that is using a phone to film the screen or a camera. I'm going to actually get that thing where you can film the screen and record while you're talking. But in the meantime, you can see right here it's got the timetables marked off with the longitude. You see here the longitude, latitude lines where you can actually see the time zone markings. So this actually, in a flat earth model, the true scriptural nature of the earth, something that can be taken away from the Gleason map is, notice right up here in the corner it says this was in 1892, and this map did have patents in multiple countries and stuff, guys. So this is before the Roman Catholic Church got her heliocentric really rooted in everybody deep, and the Jesuits got the job finally done with the globe thing. That apparently, as you can see, they were still taught in the world that this was how the true nature of the earth looked. Believe it or not, before everybody got involved, they're running their courses that's like described in the Book of Enoch. And whenever you can take that into consideration, you can have a time zone on here. There's no reason not to have time zone, because you can have the full 24 hours in the day. The Gleason's map even accommodated for that, although that the sun and moon is not marked on here. And the other fact of that matter is when you start taking into account the writings in the Book of Enoch and the luminaries, how that they run their course. We're got, summertime up here for us, it's a tighter pattern. Wintertime, it's a further out pattern. That equates for why that Alaska has such a long summer. It's because look at it, how, there's no difference to this, guys, than as there is on the globe. So, that's not like that's an issue there. This actually makes more sense on a flat earth for why Alaska, and I'm just using them for example, would have more light than as it would be on the globe. And guys, just to articulate out, lastly, kind of when it comes to the Alaska thing right here, as you can see what I was just sketching out is the tighter circle that runs. So as we can see, we can almost have a full daylight visible up at the north like that. As opposed to whenever, the wintertime on the, what will be winter solstice for us in the northern hemisphere, you have the summer solstice down at the lower portion of the earth. So, our friends down in Australia and so on, the sun be moved further away, and therefore, you have that long period of practically darkness above a certain parallel. So, I mean, I hope that clarifies that point out right there as well on the flat Earth disc, because I mean, even it's laid out on this map as well. Now, a couple last things on the Gleason map is that now right down here, if you notice, there's a lot of Antarctica that was not marked off. I think they were full well sold out that it was an ice ring around the world, and that, you know, there was nothing beyond that. I think they pretty much concluded that I think whoever had control of making this map pretty much understood very well what the scripture described, because the layout of the map is completely in line with what scripture describes. But you know, there's only chunks of it that's actually marked off, and that's interesting because, you know, I mean, you had Cook and all these others circumnavigate the so-called globe, but I mean, even on this Gleason map, there's only portions of it that's actually marked off. But you definitely need to download your copy. You'd enjoy looking this thing over. I mean, there is just so much information on it, but also
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Are you there, Curveball? Wake up. 88. Infinity. The year they developed Greenwich Mean Time. 0 degrees. They will think to change times and laws. They changed the 24-hour clock to a 12-hour clock, all based on Greenwich Mean Time. You see this here, the Analma, Curveball. Remember, never forget the Analma. It speeds up. It goes in and out of these gates, according to Enoch. 17 hours. It's a clock. Been given patents because it tells the time around the world.
Regardless of which map or mapping you do, as long as you kept that map in that form and your center point was the same, you would know, based on the center point of where you're at, the location based on degrees or intersecting lines, where that point is. So if you transfer that into a small version or replicated it, you would always know based on the center point of where that center point is, where everything else is at. The problem lies in that once you created the map in that form, if you change either one, it would distort the relative size and location of that point. So if you took the square and converted that into a polar region, it would distort it. And the same for the polar region. If you took the original polar region and converted it into the square type map, it would distort it. So once it's created, it has to stay in that format if that's what you're using. So the whole idea of projections makes no sense, because every projection will distort something. So we have to understand that the only way to map it is on either a square or a circular map. The question is why a circular map was used and is still being used today. And that's very interesting because, well, it's not, sadly, I was going to say sadly, but unfortunately, we are not taught the reasons for that. Why there's a circle, and more specifically, why there's 360 degrees of a circle. Why every circle is always considered to have 360 degrees. You could have whatever you wanted. You could divide that into 800, 700, 1,000 degrees. Why is it 360 degrees? So let's see what the Ministry of Truth website has to say about why a circle has 360 degrees. The original, well, let's highlight this here so you can know what I'm talking about. The original motivation for choosing the degree as a unit of rotations and angles is unknown. One theory states that it is related to the fact that 360 is approximate number of days in a year. Ancient astronomers noticed that the sun, which follows the ecliptic path over the course of the year, seems to advance in its path by approximately 1 degree each day. Some ancient calendars, such as the Persian calendar, use 360 days for a year. The use of a calendar with 360 days may be related to the use of sexagesimal numbers. Ooh, butchered that one. The answer is all right there. Now you have to understand that a good lie always has truth mixed in. And that is exactly what happened with the circle, with this topic right here. So what happened is the ancients, whoever they were, realized that the sun took approximately 360 days to return to its original location, because the sun is always moving. So what I did is I took the timeanddate.com snapshot for 1 day on the first of the month for 12 months. So this is a series of 12 images. So the sun, here's GMT line right here. Okay, so GMT midnight, so it's midnight in England, and it's noontime on the other side. So watch as every month, if I go back, or now the sun is actually starting to watch as it goes. This is April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And then it goes right back to. Now watch it in motion. Notice the figure 8. So the ancients found out that the sun's gyrations always return back to its original position every 360 days. Roughly. We know now it's more like 365 if you average it out, but for them it was figured 360 days. That's how we wound up with 360 degrees. Now, if it was wrong, would they still be using that? Of course not. Because that is why the Earth is always mapped in a circle. Because the sun going around the circle is what dictates the map. That's why it's a circle. That's why we don't use a square. It's because the sun, and I'm going to show you this in a little bit here too, the sun rotating around the Earth dictated which map to use. Okay, so let's say you found Hawaii and you wanted to map it out. And we're going to put a center point in that area. That's your home base. And we're going to put a circle in degrees, 360 degree circle on there. Now, we're going to start rowing out to each island, and as each degree you pass, you're going to start marking it, both longitude and latitude. Now, when you get done and you mapped all that out to all the islands, would that not be an accurate representation and size of the islands in respect to the center point? Of course it would be. The size and the location of the islands would be correct. It would be an accurate representation of reality on that map. So here's the latest update on the azimuthal equidistant map we've come to know as the Gleason map. Now, turns out the equidistant, well, that part we probably kind of knew, was the latitude lines are all equal distant from the center outward as far as it'll go. Well, it turns out and it makes sense, there'll be a point from the inside to the outside where one of those degree lines of longitude will be equal to the latitude. And it turns out that part is the equator, hence the name. So the equator is named that apparently because at that point it is equal distant to the latitude lines. That is why when I did the calculation on the speed of the sun, it all worked out because it's at the equator, and at the equator, 1 degree equals 60 nautical miles. So at that point, it makes sense both for latitude and for longitude. Each degree will be 60 nautical miles. Now, once you deviate from that, it all changes. But that's what they used to calculate the speed of the Earth, which really was the speed of the sun at the equator going over the flat Earth. So next we're going to be looking at the longitude and time portion of it here. And I found this book called Practical Arithmetic. Highly recommend you guys download this and read it. Very, very good. But there is a section in it, and this thing was published in 1873, and it was put in the New York Public Library in 1904. Let's see here. So let's read this. The equatorial circumference of the Earth is divided into 360 degrees, which are called degrees of longitude. The sun apparently goes around the Earth once in 24 hours. This time is called a day. Hence, the 24 hours, the sun apparently passes over 360 degrees of longitude. And in 1 hour, over 1/24 of 360 degrees is 15 degrees. Since the sun is passing over 15 degrees of longitude requires 1 hour or 60 minutes of time, in 1 minute of time, he will pass over 1/60th of 15 degrees. 15 degrees over 60 is 1/4 equals 15 minutes of longitude. So 1/4 degree equals 15 minutes of longitude. Right. So 15 degrees of longitude require 1 hour of time. 15 minutes of longitude require 1 minute of time. And 15 seconds of longitude require, 15 15 seconds requires 1 second of time. So this is why they have the black and white lines, is between each parallel there's 15 degrees. So the black little square is 5 degrees, 10, 15, and the same for the outer ring as well. But as I stated before, this only matches up to the equator, not out here. Oops. So the 15 degrees marks on the outside ring here only apply when it's on the equator. So let's continue. Hence we see that if the longitude expressed in degrees, minutes, and seconds is divided by 15 equals 3 times 5, the quotients will be hours, minutes, and seconds of time. If time expressed in hours, minutes, and seconds be multiplied by 15 equals 3 times 5, the product will be degrees, minutes, and seconds of longitude. When the sun is on the meridian of any place, it is 12 o'clock or noon at that place. Now, as the sun apparently goes from east to west, at the instant of noon, at one place, it will be past noon for all, let's go to the next page, all places at the east of it, and before noon for all places at the west. Hence, we find the difference of time between two places and know the exact time at one of them. The corresponding time of the other will be found by adding this difference to the given time, if the place be east, or by subtracting it if west. The meridian of the Observatory of Greenwich, London, is the one from which longitude is reckoned. That's right there. Let's zoom in on that. That's the line, prime meridian. Let's see. Longitude is is estimated west 180 degrees and east 180 degrees from the prime meridian. Baltimore is longitude 76 degrees 37 minutes west, and New York is longitude 74 degrees 1 minute west. When it is 12 midnight at Baltimore, what is the time in New York? Well, the analysis comes out to the difference of longitude is 2 degrees 36 minutes and changed to time by dividing by 15 gives 10 minutes 24 seconds. For the difference of time, and as New York is east of Baltimore, the time is later and we would add. So 12 plus 10 plus 24 equals 12 midnight, 10 minutes, 24 seconds. So 10 minutes, 24 seconds after midnight is the difference in time by using that method. The longitude of New York, okay, so these are some more examples that you can work with down here. But this is the important part. Calculating the time. And this is something that Shills always threw in on my comments. And not just mine, but everybody else's on it. Oops. In order to calculate the time, the degrees and the points on the degrees must be correct. So, therefore, this map with the 360 degrees and the points on there is the actual location of that area. So, New York is right there. Baltimore's just below it, but that is where it is. The shapes of the continents and the shapes of the land masses are correct on an azimuthal equidistant map, because they have to be in order for the time calculator to work. So in order for this calculator here to work, the land masses must be correct. See, this map is actually two things. One, it is an equidistant map. It has the longitude in degrees, and it's also a time calculator. That's why they have all this time on the outside and the degrees marked with the 15 degree intervals at the equator. But what that means is that it would be impossible for this map to work as a time calculator if the land masses did not match the coordinates and the degrees of the 360 degree circle. So, and I'm almost positive I can prove to you, especially when it comes to our friend over here, in which I'm going to just call him from now on, no longer down under, but on the outer circle. I'm pretty sure I can prove that this landmass is correct, and this one is not. So stay with me here, and I'm going to explain to you how I came about that. But right now, based on this, all this information I've seen, there is no better map. That's why, as I stated in that video, that tutorial on how to do flat Earth maps, every map you see out there is a version of this. It's a I hate to use that word, the projection, but they hack this one into the rectangular picture, this one right here, and that's where we see all that. That's where it all comes from. So I looked at all sorts of ways to try to calculate the distance or the length of Australia. And I looked at the air routes like everybody else does. And I even had the idea to use Google Street View and start on one end of the country and look at the sign for the mileage and try to add them all up. That didn't last too long. That was tedious. But then I had the idea. I don't know why I never thought of this before, but I would like to introduce to you what could be the key to unlocking Australia, and that is the Indian Pacific Railroad. Now, the great thing about this line, this railroad, this is the southernmost railroad in the world. And it literally goes follows Australia on the southern side from Sydney all the way to Perth. And this is the map they give us on their website on there. But what's interesting is if you look at it on the flat Earth map, it's practically a straight line. So now let's look at some of the stats about this railroad. And this is right from their website. Average length of the train is 704 meters. 2 locomotives and 30 carriages. Now that's very important. 2 locomotives. Keep that in mind. Average weight of train 1,400 tons. Length of track 4,352 kilometers. The length of the journey 65 hours, Sydney to Perth, and 4,352 kilometers. So there's no more track 4,352 kilometers is all there is. There's no maintenance track. There's no other path. That's all they track, I guess. So, average speed of train, 85 kilometers per hour with a maximum of 115 kilometers. That equates to about 52 miles per hour for those of us living on the other side. The wedge-tailed eagle, Australia's largest bird of prey, I could really care less. Average number of carriages, 30 carriages, including guest carriages, crew quarters, restaurants, lounges, and power vans, whatever those are. So, this data is key to unlocking the distance of Australia. Now, we're going to be looking at the Sydney to Perth route, which has the fewest amount of stops. It could go vice versa, but either one. It goes from Sydney to Adelaide to Perth. Now, I did a quick mapping on Google. I know, but just to see. And Google has a very different distance than the railroad did. And as you can see here, I added it all up. It comes out to 2,331 miles, or 3,751 kilometers, as the total distance for the train ride. So now let's see where it all comes out. So I started off by verifying the actual travel time. And now let me just say this. If you're going on a passenger train in an intercontinental type situation for 3-4 days, and the train's only averaging 42 miles per hour, hop in the car or on a plane. Seriously. Because it's not worth your time. But anyway, so when we do that, we still have a huge difference for Google of 311 miles or 446 kilometers. Now for Indian Pacific, it almost zeroed out. But again, at 42 miles per hour, that's passenger or freight train speeds on a good day. So that's impossible to have a freight train or a passenger train going across a continent that big, and they're only averaging 42 miles per hour. Get out and walk; it'll be faster. So, as we look at the actual differences, we have a huge problem here for the globalists. They're going to have to answer this one big time, because Australia is bigger than what the map on the globe or the Mercator projection looks. It matches the flat Earth, the Gleason map. That's what that is. So, if anyone can add to this, please add to the comments or contact me through the Google Mail. But I'm fairly confident at this point that Australia is much bigger than it looks on the globe map or the Mercator. And those of you in Australia, and if you can hop on a train, take your wife on a birthday surprise or something for 3 days and put an app on your phone to measure the speed. What's your average speed? And if you can do that, it'll tell you what the actual distance is, because we have an opportunity right there, because the track is fixed. They can't change the route of the track. You have one train. You know when it begins, when it ends, at every stop. You can calculate the whole thing out. So I encourage brilliant friends out there, get out there and find out. Hop on that train. Anyway, that's all I've got. Thank you.
My rhymes are so vivid, you start to see things way different. America's fate, I was fast asleep, but now I'm wide awake. I was under the spell,
Put a spell on you.
till I had a total recall. Forgot what I already knew. It took me 33 years for me to see the truth. Ever so clear, I was too young, I couldn't articulate myself the right way, son. But now, let me break it down, pass it all around. This is not a theory, the conspiracy.
A new world order.
Put me in a straight jacket in a padded room. Tell the world it's 12 monkeys, so they could be confused.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep their eye on me. But I'ma stay incognito in places they can't find me. Make my moves strategically. Illuminati
You
want
were
my
both in
mind,
Skull
soul,
and
and
Bones,
my
the
body.
secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it.
You
both were members of Skull and Bones, the secret society of Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret.
He will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will lift me high upon a rock. He will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will lift me high upon a rock. My head shall be lifted up over my enemies.
Took me 33 years for me to see the truth.
My head shall be lifted up over my enemies. My head shall be lifted up over my enemies. My head shall be lifted up over my enemies. And I believe I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I believe I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I believe I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I believe I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Oh Lord, you are the one thing I desire, one thing that I long.
The Christian media is a dying force, and as we move into the satanic century,
we're going to see Christianity's last gasp.
No reason to be afraid when I'm with you. Oh Lord, you are the one thing I desire, one thing that I long for, God, to be with you. And Lord, you are my light and my salvation. No reason to be afraid when I'm with you.